Welcome back to Coleman Nation. I'm Michael Coleman, your host. Exciting episode today. I actually had a friend of mine that unfriended me over the content that I'm going to give today regarding the environment. Is it really as scary as everyone portrays it to be, or is it completely blown out of proportion? I'm going to go over a couple of points that I think are important to make, and I'd love to hear your answers in the comments. But yeah, stay tuned for the next episode, The Coleman Nation. So today's episode, part of the thing of the channel is I really don't want to go into a bunch of stuff that could be considered super controversial. But this one in particular, just kind of like, it wasn't so much about the controversy about the environment and the, sort of the narrative around the environment. That wasn't the thing. It was the fact of engaging with someone who I thought that I was engaging in a conversation about the environment. I was asked a specific question. I was trying to answer the question. I would love to have been able to get logical answers to those questions. But what happened was it was just like all of a sudden, boom. I said, oh, I'm not getting any more content from this person. And the next thing you know, I'm unfriended and blocked and whatever. And I was just like, are you freaking kidding me? Really? Like, you asked the question. And so what it was, and again, I think this is important because I think that in order to be able to come up with solutions, we have to be able to look at the different points of view and go, okay, well, these people are right in this area, and so let's move in this direction. These people are wrong in this area, but are we willing to, sort of course correct and move in a different direction? And especially regarding the environment, I've always considered myself to be something of an environmentalist, meaning that, like, from when I was a little kid, I was like constantly picking up trash around the neighborhood. I quote unquote started my own business, picking up cans and bottles and doing recycling. I spent so much time in my youth collecting cans and bottles and taking them to the Burbank Recycling Center in Southern California. And I'd get, a couple of bucks and be able to play some video games or, buy a new toy or something like that. I even set up these little stations, my little can crushing stations, at home, because I was like, Dad, this is the way I'm going to make money, is I'm going to, recycle things. And over time, I was always taught, like, look, you need to safeguard and improve your environment. You need to be able to take care of your environment, because this is where you live, and you should have not just pride, but you should have responsibility for your area. And so I've always sort of fancied myself as a bit of an environmentalist in that regard, is like, look, we got one planet, we got to take care of it. But one of the things that really bothers me is the narrative and the fact that people in relationship to the environment, it's almost like they turn off all thinking and logical concepts when it comes to that. And when that happens and you start pushing back, and again, by the way, I felt a little twinge of regret because I had these questions that, in response to this post, and I started posting these questions and the answers to the question. And I was like, well, I certainly wouldn't want to lose a friend over it, but I also don't want to be bullied, into taking on a point of view that I don't agree with, And so in the spirit of what the whole purpose of this channel is, which is, to upgrade our mentality, to increase our ability to think and, and to engage in order to synthesize real solutions for things that are out there and the problems, I think that we can only accomplish that through greater communication and being open to exploring other people's point of view. And so the questions that were asked is that the post in particular had a bunch of graphs that were posted. And in there, it was essentially, the questions were, can anyone read these? Like, why can't people read these graphs? Did that ability, get thrown out the window or something along those lines? Is like, can you guys just simply read the graph and understand the data? Right. And so that was the first thing. And then the second question is, why aren't people more freaked out? Like, why isn't everyone freaking out about, this data that's here? And I thought, well, hey, if you're going to ask the question, if you're going to say, okay, well, do you know how to read a graph? And why aren't you freaking out? I'm like, correct me if I'm wrong, these are not rhetorical questions. These are questions that are designed to elicit a response and encourage engagement. And so I said, all right, let's go ahead and answer those questions. So let's talk about the first one, number one. Okay. So the question is, do you know how to read a graph? Well, the actuality of it is that yes, I think that this is the reason why more people aren't freaked out, because I looked into the graph and I looked at it and I said, okay, well, the first thing that I looked at was number one was scaling. Okay. And I looked at it and I said, literally, this graph has these giant jumps and these huge drops and like all this stuff. And then there was all of this stuff highlighted in red as the outlier, and I was looking at it and I was like, oh my gosh, this is a terrifying graph. I don't know what it means, right? And so then I looked at the scaling of it and I was like, this is a 1 degree difference. So what did they do? They took the variation of 1 degree. Okay, so, like one single degree, and then they blew it up so that it was huge. So we're talking variations that were basically like 1/12 of a degree would cause these giant jumps and valleys inside of this graph. And I was like, I am not going to lose sleep over 1 degree. The second thing was over what period of time. So it was a 1 degree change over a very short period of time. I'm like, this could be weather from like this year. Like, how am I supposed to make an informed decision about, the radical changes in weather if the graph, the data that you're presenting, it is not real? It's not a real cross section of actual information. And so that was the thing. I was like, listen, first of all, if everything's color coded in red, your scaling is off and your time is off, right? Then I'm sitting here going, this isn't a graph that's here to present information. This is actual, like, straight out of Madison Avenue advertising and marketing. That was my background. This is straight up mental manipulation at its finest. And I got to be honest with you, I sat back and I was like, wow, actually, this is if I were a marketing person designing a campaign to elicit emotional responses, I was like, these graphs are incredible. And so from my point of view as originally, like I said, having been in advertising and marketing, I was like, these things are freaking brilliant, right? But then once you push back on it, I was like, they don't make any sense. The graphs don't make any sense. And then the other thing too is, who are the sources? Who are these people? And I find that a lot of the things that are out there are from academics. And when you start pushing, okay, well, what are the data sets that you started utilizing? How did you come up with these conclusions, right? And what happens is that the modeling is an absolute mess, right? They're saying, wow, this is a great example. I read this post the other day, which totally I was chuckling out loud. This is so funny. And the person said, hey, my baby has gained, a certain amount of pounds and has grown 6 inches in the last 6 months, newborn, the baby's 6 inches longer and has gained, 7 pounds over the last 6 months. At this rate, by the time my baby's 20, he'll be 1 trillion pounds and, and 28,000 feet tall. And I was like, that's the problem, is that you take this little data set. That's not how it actually works. A baby is not going to continuously grow 6 inches and 6 pounds every 6 months for eternity, right? But that's the problem, is you take these little changes in data and extrapolate it over a long period of time. And you go, no, that's not how that works. This is something that I think that everyone needs to understand. The earth is a self-healing organism that actually will course correct over time. So these imbalances that we see that are out there, it actually winds up fixing itself. I'll talk about that in a second. But I really feel like we don't have the data, knowledge, understanding or currently capacity to fully understand the self-healing organism that is the planet. And in all honesty, I really think that if we did become such a threat to the planet, that humanity became such a threat, I think that we'd see that they would just go, you know what, we're going to wipe the planet, of all of humanity. Here's a few tidal waves. Here's a couple of earthquakes. Let's kind of really blast up that temperature. But there's no way that we could know that, right? And so I just think that, long term, the fact is that the data that we're receiving, we need to keep it in perspective. That was the biggest thing. So do we know how to regrasp? I think that that's the disagreement that most people have with the, sort of the environmentalists, the environmental terrorists, or, the people, these would be the people that I would call the green shirts or the rainbow army, right? If I'm going to subscribe to any of those types of ideologies, you better bring the real data, and it better be from people that can actually think these things through and are willing to go, okay, well, these are some variations and some variants that we didn't fully consider. And I gotta be honest with you, like, I think that anybody with, sort of a middle school level of objective thinking and logic would be able to kind of punch holes in these numbers. I'm like, these things don't make any sense at all, So that's the first thing, is that we know how to read those things. Number two is credibility. I start looking at these things and seeing the people that we look at as scientific authorities today, they really blew their chance. I find that the people that are on that are sort of the environmental, sort of terrorists, or the people that are really pushing this narrative, at the same time, that these are the people that we looked up to. They sit on the same side of quote unquote science as the same people that went through, the recent pandemic. I'm not going to get into a whole bunch of stuff on that. Now, all of the conclusions that any logical human being through that whole ordeal from, 2019, 2021, and 22, we look back at it and it's like, we told you so. Like, this is very easy to observe. Is a really, I'm not going to get into that because I don't know exactly the lines that I'm about to cross as far as, what I'm allowed to say or not, which, by the way, is totally ridiculous. That's a different podcast for a different time. But, being able to speak our opinions, whether they're right or wrong, that should be something that is without, there should be, that should be unquestioned. Hey, are you enjoying this episode? If so, make sure that you hit the like button. Make sure that you subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. And make sure that you hit the notifications button so that you are the first person to be able to know when we post new content. Back to the episode. The fact is that there was a cause, and now what's the effect? Lots of people dying, from questionable causes, things that never existed before, heart attacks in kids. I don't know. These are some things that are actually verifiably happening. But if you're sitting on the same side of science as that science, your credibility's shot, right? You need to go back to formula as far as that's concerned, because you got no credibility. There's zero credibility. People that are an authoritarian, from the education class, from no, this is not true. Okay. So the science card, pulling the science card and saying that this is the authority, those days are over. They are over. And so in order to be able to have credibility, you better come to me with some very, very tight research and things that I can observably see that are true for myself. Why are we not afraid, right? Why is this something that we feel is overblown? People that think like me, other folks that are out there. This number 3 is vested interests. I think my opinion is that big green is much worse than big oil. Much worse. You want to know why? Because with big oil, you know what you're getting. You know what you're getting. You know that you got the hydrocarbons. You know that you've got the air pollution. You know that you got these things. Which, by the way, science over the last 30 years, this is not the 70s, right? So over the last 50 years, science has improved so remarkably as far as emissions and output. And by the way, who's leading the technology advancements in the areas of, reduced emissions? The United States. So why is it that the United States is bearing the brunt of all of the things that, of the entire environmental woes of the entire planet are falling on the United States? No, that is 100% not acceptable. Because here's the deal. You look at Big Green, and are there vested interests? I think that anybody, that has the considerations like, oh, you know what? I want to make sure that we're environmental and socially better and all these different types of things. If all you were to look at is, are there vested interests even within alternative energies and Big Green? The answer to that question is yes. And do you think that vested interests would spend millions, if not billions of dollars, further entrenching the civilization in an ideology that brings them more money? You bet they would spend millions, if not billions, in order to continue to create a mental stronghold over the civilization, over society, in order to continue their vying for power. This is absolutely, and by the way, don't get me started. And people go, oh, well, that's capitalism. That's 100% not capitalism. That's cronyism. But again, that is an episode for another day. I'm not going to get into that. We're going to stay on track, right? Big oil, you get what you pay for. You know exactly what the score is. You know the manufacturing processes are very well known. Now you go to different countries, their implementations of it are going to be different, but at least within the United States, we have lots of oil reserves here, for the people that we receive our oil from, like in the Middle East, they have very standard processes in order to be able to provide the types of energy that are required for the entire world to be able to efficiently run with those types of hydrocarbons. But you look at Big Green, no. The enslavement of kids in Africa in order to be able to produce things like cobalt and other rare earth minerals in order to be able to make people feel good about their electric cars. And in fact, by the way, the electric car narrative is being flipped upside down right now as we speak, right? Because there's a lot of people that are, and I love driving around in Teslas. I got lots of friends that have Teslas. I got lots of friends that, are very much, love their EVs and whatnot. But I sit there and I go, man, where are the sources of these? And whenever we say these things like, net zero, that's not possible. You can't expend a resource that creates carbon and then on the other side over here, that's already been made, right? But then you say, well, I'm going to go over here and do this other action that's going to take that carbon back. And I'm like, I don't know about you, but that sounds like the stupidest thing. You can't have something that goes out into the world and then have it that this other action over here is going to negate that. But you know what does? If you pay enough money, right? If you pay enough money, you can actually have carbon credits that actually negate what it is that you spend. Does this seem like a scam to anybody? Well, to me, I just sit there going, this is the same thing that would happen, in the 50s with big tobacco, right? Saying, hey, listen, we did the research, we did the funding, 9 out of 10 doctors agree. Tobacco isn't going to kill you. It's not going to cause cancer. What happens? Fast forward 40 years after that, and it's like, we were kind of wrong, And so I think that, science is a very dynamic and ever-changing sort of concept. And I think that we can't just be sucked into this is the way that it is right now. We have to have a much longer view of these types of things. And I think that literally right now, the first thing that you should look at is like, who are the vested interests and what are they going to get out of it? So that's number 3. Number 4, this is another thing of, okay, why don't people care, quote unquote, care more about the environment? And this was a question that I saw, on a podcast the other day. And I thought it was really, really fascinating is what's the ideal temperature? What is the ideal temperature? What's the temperature that we're supposed to to be at. We hear about like, oh, if the earth goes up by another 1 degree or 1.5 degrees, then it's going to spell that we're going to be on a certain, we're going to be on track for certain planetary annihilation. I'm like, well, then what's the ideal temperature? And I started thinking about it. Where do people live? Right? You got people that live in the northernmost, the northern territories of Canada, where it's absolutely, some of the coldest temperatures on the planet. Buffalo, New York, right? We're talking about some of the coldest places on Earth, Siberia. Humans have figured out how to live there. Okay. Then you go to other places where it's like the Sahara Desert, 124, 125 degrees, that, temperatures. You're sitting there going, well, wait a second. Are you serious? That is so if we as human beings could figure out how to survive in negative 60 degrees of, temperatures in some of the iciest, coldest places on the planet, and we also are able to survive and even thrive in some of the desert, territories where it's the hottest and driest on the planet. Okay. You got this wide range from negative 60 to positive 124. And you're telling me that if the temperature increases to 125 and negative 59, that now this spells certain disaster and end for the world. And I'm like, guys, the math ain't mathin'. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. And here's what's going to happen. I say, correct me if I'm wrong. And gets done. Tons of comments and posts about there was this study and there was this other. Who's doing these studies? They're being financed by the same companies that wind up having vested interests in that we talk about at number 3. It doesn't make any sense. Right? Why would I listen to people that want me to have a certain outcome on these, certain logical outcome? They want me to have certain conclusions in order to be able to have that, right? And I'm like, listen, I don't buy it. So that's the question. What is the ideal temperature? The other thing too, and this is on this same aspect of it, is have you noticed the shift? And what am I talking about? The shift. It used to be global warming. And then all of a sudden it changed to climate change. Isn't it interesting? It went from global warming, and everyone's terrified of global warming. We're gonna cross a line. We're gonna cross a line where we can't go anymore. If it gets any hotter, it's annihilation of the human race. And then all of a sudden, just like that, it switched to climate change. So now, it got a little cold. Like, wow, there's ice storms in North Carolina. It got colder. Climate change. Oh, it got a little bit warmer in Bermuda. Climate change. The reason why credibility is shot in these situations is because, and especially in this question, is what is the ideal temperature, right? What is the ideal temperature? Now it has nothing to do with ideal temperature. It's the fact that the weather is changing is the new marketing mantra that's out there. And I go, the weather is going to change. It's been changing. Like 10 million years ago, we were probably, 10, 20 degrees hotter than it is today. Go to the ice age, which is just 10,000 years ago. We're literally at the tail end of an ice age, right? And so it got super cold and now warmed up. And then now we're going back into a cooling phase. The earth goes in cycles. This is something that I think I learned when I was in like the 4th grade in elementary school, is that the weather changes, right? And so this is the way I look at it. With the new narrative shifting from global warming, what it is? Oh, got a little too warm? Give me some money. Got too cold? Give me some money, right? And I'm like, no, that's not going to play out anymore. And I think people are kind of tired of that. I think that fundamentally people want to take care of the environment, but the fact is that we've been played, and now there's this new narrative that's out that's just continuing to be able to say, hey, listen, we need to relinquish all of our freedoms and everything in order to be able to, to appease the climate boogie monster. No, I don't think that's going to play out anymore. Okay. Number 5 is arrogance. The absolute arrogance of the people that, are the folks that are in charge of the climate narrative. It's arrogance. I look at them and I'm going, are you freaking kidding me? let's take a look at this. Carbon dioxide. Okay. And again, I got this from the podcast that I'd watched the other day. The carbon dioxide, the molecule that supposedly controls the weather. Like if we could harness and control how much carbon dioxide, if we could just like turn it down and turn it back up again. And this is sort of like controlling the carbon dioxide content of the atmosphere is going to like give us whether or not, we can just control the weather just by like, turning that up and down. It's the Nest thermostat of the planet is how much carbon dioxide there is. Do you know that it's called the gas of life? Did you know that? That carbon dioxide is literally considered the gas of life. What does that mean? If we wind up actually turning up the carbon dioxide, do you know what would happen? The plant growth on the planet would go out of control. And then all of a sudden we'd have so much oxygen, we would be oxygen rich. And then that leads to a whole bunch of other different problems, right? Not problems. I mean, I love oxygen. I think I use it every day and have since the day that I was born. And so the fact is that the earth will gently figure out the balances that are required in order to continue to sustain life on the planet. And so to tell me that carbon dioxide levels are the thing that is going to absolutely, number one, change the weather, and number two, determine whether or not humanity is going to survive long term. I said, I was born at night, but not last night. Are you freaking kidding me? That makes no sense at all, right? And so it wouldn't trap in all the heat. It would actually wind up, this quote unquote greenhouse effect. What do greenhouses do? They make plants grow. And if you're an environmentalist, why wouldn't you want to grow more plants? I'm sitting there, this is actually a great thing, right? Now, I do think that, you look at logically, again, let's apply some logic to this. Do we want to, completely annihilate all the rainforests? Absolutely not. And I think that is really, really important to understand. I am 100% for growing more trees, putting more plants there, because the more plants and animal life and growth that we have, I think that's going to be better for us. And we need to be able to, figure out ways to peacefully coexist and stop destroying the planet. But don't you dare weaponize my desire to be able to take care of the planet, weaponize that against me and saying that I'm not contributing enough, or that I need to pay money in order to some carbon tax in order to be able to manage the temperature on Earth. It literally makes no sense, and it's completely insane. Number 6, why is it that we feel like, again, that that nobody cares about the environment? Number 6 is a track record of failed conclusions. Okay. A track record of failed conclusions. Okay. So what am I talking about? Okay. If you go back and you look in time, I remember in the 70s, Leonard Nimoy was talking about, on one of those documentaries. And I grew up in that time. It was like, and I remember being terrified as a little kid, was like, pretty soon the entire planet's going to be frozen, right? At the trajectory that we're on right now, we're all going to freeze to death. The Earth is going to be out of control. We're going to be a giant ball of ice, right? They were talking about a second ice age was coming, and it was probably going to hit by the time, the 80s and the 90s were going to come around. And I was like, wow, all right, I better get my jacket out. And so this is me as a little kid. I was like 7 or 8 years old, and I was worried about, about the second ice age that was going to come in my lifetime. And then in the 80s, they said, nope. Hey, listen, we miscalled it in the 70s. Okay. And so we're not all going to die on a giant snowball, on a giant ice cube. But what's really happening is there's a giant hole in the ozone layer. And so what's causing those, right? The chlorofluorocarbons, right? The CFCs. And I said, well, where are the CFCs? Well, the CFCs, where are they? In hairspray. If you know anything about the 80s, it was hairspray. Like that was Aquanet. Like everybody had Aquanet, and I'll tell you this. I was not one of the hairband guys. I was one of the, one of the like sort of the mods. If you can't believe, I did have hair at one point in time, and I used to like wear it up in like a giant pompadour and whatnot. And so I was using hairspray. And I was like, dude, I would use tons of that stuff. I'm walking in the 80s and I'm giant pompadour hairdo and whatever. And I stopped. I remember I stopped in like 1987. I was like, you know what? I can't be responsible for the hole in the ozone layer and the CFCs and the chlorofluorocarbons. And you know what? I'm going to do my part. I'm going to sacrifice, and I'm not going to wear, no more Aquanet, no more hairsprays, no more pressurized deodorants. I've got rid of all that stuff. And I made significant lifestyle changes as a teenager and into my early 20s in order to be able to fix the hole in the ozone layer. You know what? Nothing happened. The freaking stupid hole fixed itself. In fact, you look at scientists and they're like, we don't know what happened. Is it because I stopped, wearing a pompadour and I had, no more hairspray? I don't think so. I don't think that that's what happened. Could I be the person that, caused the ozone layer to fix? I don't know. Maybe. Highly doubtful. Again, it goes back to the fact that the earth is a self-healing organism, and we don't understand that. In fact, I think that more scientists should be going in and analyzing that. Like, how is the earth a self-healing organism? And are the things that we're doing, like, what are the real impacts that we're having? Don't give me these trajectories and extrapolations on data that you can just change a variable. And then next thing you know, you got your hand out saying, hey, you need to give me some money. Otherwise the whole world's going to end. That's not going to happen. Then we were told we were going to be under sheets of ice. And then it was going to be a boiling ball of, boiling hot lava rocks, that we're going to have to, and it's just it is over and over and over again. It was like by 2012, all of life was supposed to be over. Then by 2023, life was going to be over again. So what happens is, I just want you to think about this. As a result of these things, and I speak from experience, the climate narrative, the stories that we're being told, does that cause us to change our actions? And the new actions that we're undertaking, is someone making money off of those new actions? And I started looking at it. I was like, every time these new things are introduced, I change the trajectory of what my activities are in life, and someone is making money on that. And I go, you know what? I really think that these types of stories are propagated, right? These types of stories are propagated in order, and they're designed to control and manipulate masses through fear. Who has time to look at all of these things? All we get are some bullet points and some bullet items and graphs that are in red, and next thing you know, boom, they expect us to react in a certain way and relinquish our freedoms and all these different types of things. And I just got to be honest, I think that people are tired of it. But you know what's happening is generations are coming forward and they're forgetting, right? And they're not having conversations. In fact, the way that we're taught is that the authoritarian educational systems are put in place. Kids don't have any right or even understanding of how to draw conclusions. And the next thing you know is, hey, this is what I was told. And if I don't change, and you know what? These Gen Xers, these baby boomers, they don't know what they're talking about. You know what we should be doing is we should be having more conversations. We should be having more discussions about these types of things. And instead of, being yelled at, and like, you just don't understand, being like, hey, listen, maybe there is some experience that we can lend to the situation in order to be able to not just make your lives better, but to make you happier. If you're being fed a bunch of garbage and a bunch of lies, and you're being manipulated and your activities are changing and you're angry, who's benefiting from that? Like for me, I'm not benefiting. I would rather not have an entire generation of people angry about the climate. That's going to be something that's going to change no matter what anyway, and so that's number 6 is track record of failed conclusions. Here's another reasons why we don't care about the environment. Okay. Number 7, this one's going to hit hard. Okay. But number 7 is what? Objective reality. Okay. I've been I've lived in Florida, on and off, it's like this go around, I've been here for the past 5 years. Okay. Before that, in the end of the 90s and in the early 2000s, I lived here for a few years. So pretty much for the past 25, 26 years, there's one particular, sort of boardwalk beach that I've been walking on for like on and off for the last 25 years. And there's this one spot right there that every time that I walk by it, I've just noticed it. And this is going back again, 25 years ago to today. okay, is there's one set of rocks and the water level has not risen. Not 1 millimeter. Not one. That water level has stayed there, right? And it's been exactly the same. Well, of course, it's the Gulf of Mexico, so it's not quite as active as maybe an ocean or anything like that. But the fact of the matter is, if water levels are rising all over the planet, well, then all of a sudden they should be rising here. There should have been like maybe a foot more of water. I was told, hey, by the time that, the climate has changed and all that kind of stuff, there's going to be multiple feet. We're going to have like all these natural disasters. To be honest with you, I sit there and I go, wow, you know what the problem is? Is that all of the floods and the things that are out there, tsunamis, these things have literally been around since the dawn of time. Weather changes. Can you imagine if you knew that, what's it called? Pangea, the entire earth was going to break up into 7 continents, right? Do you know how much terror you could exact on civilization if you knew that this one giant landmass was going to break up into 7 huge continents? Are you freaking kidding me? I would be a multi-trillionaire if I could monetize the breakup of land masses into continents. I'd be terrifying everybody. And you know what? The problem is it takes too much time. These things happen over multiple lifetimes. You know what I mean? And yeah, there's probably going to be some people, if California falls into the ocean, like in our lifetime, yeah, that's going to be kind of sucky for everyone. But the actual reality of it is it'd probably happen over a long period of time. And you can't really monetize that. It's like, yeah, California's going to fall in the ocean, but not in your lifetime and not in your kids' lifetimes. Could there be a giant earthquake like in Superman, the original Superman? Maybe. But the fact is it'll probably happen. These tectonic shifts happen over many hundreds, if not thousands of years, at which point it doesn't matter, right? And so objective reality dictates, I observe water levels have not risen, and so it's not going to really matter, and these things that we're afraid about or that we're losing our minds over, it's not going to be something that we really need to worry about, right now. Now, do I think that we need to adjust? Absolutely. Again, being able to peacefully coexist and not ruin our resources, I think that is a fundamental thing that we need to focus on. But losing our minds over it, this is what I tell people. Look, polar bear population is up. Water levels haven't risen. There's a lot of things that we've adjusted. We're making adjustments. We're making things better. Get outside. Look around. This is one of the things I thought about as far as objective reality. I remember how hot it was as a kid when I was growing up in Los Angeles. I was in Los Angeles recently. It was the same amount of hot. It was the same amount. Maybe it was a degree or 2 hotter or cooler than it was, but it sucks. It was the dry heat. I come to Florida. It's the same heat as it was 25 years ago, right? I say, look, go outside, look around, stop looking at numbers, extrapolations and trajectories of different statistics. Go outside, look around. You're being manipulated. Touch some grass. Life is going to be okay. It's not going to be as scary or as bad as you think that it is. And by the way, you should not be losing any sleep over it. That was the other question that I was asked by my friend is like, we should be losing sleep. How come more people aren't losing sleep? Because again, it's just not something that's going to, and I don't want to say this, that it's not going to affect us. I want to leave this planet much better than I found it for my daughter, for my kids. I want them to inherit something that's better. It should always be the goal of every generation to leave it better than they found it. And that is my goal, right? But the fact of the matter is that to be afraid of something that isn't going to manifest itself now, if ever, it's not worth the mental decay that society would go through worrying about something that is not going to come to pass or is like 20,000 years into the future, and it would have happened whether we made any changes or not. I think that we need to take responsibility, and that's all right. And then number 8, contradictory actions. Why do we not care about, quote unquote, care about the environment? It's because of the contradictory actions of the people that are in charge. You cry about carbon emissions on your private jets. That makes no sense. If you really felt strongly about that, you would be walking to Davos, Switzerland. Seriously, you would be, okay? Clamor the end of the world and rising water levels while buying beachfront properties. Are you serious? You would be living on a mountaintop in the middle of Colorado if you really felt like we were going to be, an adaptation of, Kevin Costner's Waterworld, where there's no land anymore. The last place that you'd be is buying, a $10 million beachfront property. Absolutely not. Right. And so another thing is you look at, hey, we're going to feed the world bug protein while we're eating ribeyes at the French Laundry. No, I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it. There's no way that if the people that are saying that we have to be worried about these things, your actions are contradictory to the things that you're preaching about. I'm sorry, you've lost all credibility at that point. Your contradictory actions, contradicting the words that you're saying in order to be able to gain control, I am not going to buy it anymore. And this is the reason why I don't think anyone else should be buying it either. By definition, science is questioning things. When you say this authority, this person who's done the research and has the funding and has the backing, and this is the way that it is, immediately the first thing that you should be asking is why? Why is it that way? And why is there, and this is the question that I would offer to anybody that wants me to have the point of view of the end of the world. And this is going to be, it's the environment's we're all going to, either boil in a giant ball of fire or we're going to freeze in a giant ice cube. This is the question that I think that you need to ask yourself. Why is there a dogmatic acceptance of clearly faulty or at least questionable or perhaps even biased or manipulated research and narrative? Why is there the dogmatic acceptance of these things? That's the question that I have. Like, why would you just accept these things and not even take a second to start asking, like, why would you, should I be worried about these things? Should I be worried about, the end of the world? If you can answer that question for me, I'd love to hear your comments. I'd love to say, this is the reason why. Because the objective reality, like I said, it just doesn't exist. See, I see a booming industry in modern environmentalism. I see a booming industry in observing and documenting things that would happen anyway and then monetizing it, right? If the people that are the sort of the pillars of the environmental movement, John Kerry, Obama, the World Economic Forum, Greta Thunberg, the countless others that, if they were really concerned about any of these things, the entire narrative, I would tell you, they would be walking to Davos. They would be paddling on kayaks across the Atlantic Ocean if they really felt that the end of the world was imminent and that they wanted to do something about it. But this is the reason why I think that no one, quote unquote, cares, is because we're not rubes. I think that the majority of people, they're like sitting there and go, this doesn't make any sense. Like I'm sitting here literally, I want to believe the things that you're saying, but it doesn't, these are too many conflicting informations that the facts do not align. And I sit there and go, this is the reason why people, quote unquote, don't care. And that's the reason why you shouldn't either. I know that this one, again, my whole point of this is not to denigrate or vilify the environmental movement. I, again, actually consider myself to be something of an environmentalist. I always have been since I was a little kid. I've always wanted to take care of the environment. But what I will tell you is that we need to find better ways, and we need to ask simple questions in order to be able to draw and arrive at conclusions that are going to protect our planet and are going to protect our environment. And I think that that's the real conversation that we should be having right now. So I'd love to hear, what you have to say. Go ahead and throw me some in the comments. I'm sure that I'm going to get a little bit torched from, some of the people that are holding on to these ideologies long term. That's okay. That's okay. I think if we can open up the lines to more communication, that's going to be great. But, if you've enjoyed this episode, if this is something that makes sense to you, I'd love it. If you were to like this video, definitely subscribe if you found this content to, be of some value, and make sure that you turn on notifications so that when, the next episode hits, that you're the first person to know. So thanks again. Appreciate you. Thanks for tuning in to Coleman Nation. We'll see you on the next episode. Take care.